How's it going, guys?
Welcome back. We have a big announcement.
Yeah.
Kind of. You've probably already read it on social media.
I'm sure.
But I will be leaving the podcast.
Yeah.
And Richard will be keeping my seat warm.
Bam, biggity.
But no, if you read on the social media stuff, I'm going to be moving back to the States and taking on all sorts of new things. But I think the podcast, the direction I think it's able to go with the two of you is going to be, I think, really, really, really cool. We've got that perfect mix of Julian pushing things to the wild space and Richard being able to do really the practical stuff. And I think it'll be in really good hands.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's what you came
time.
on board was to start. Okay, but now I want to know something about the post. You said a couple of non-fitness related podcasts.
Yes.
Okay, I want to know what that's going to be about.
So I have a couple projects that I wanted to do in the podcast space just to experiment with like what you can do with podcasts generally, right?
Yeah.
Everything from kind of monetization to
Are we
subject
saying
to
flat
format.
earth?
We'll get there.
Okay,
We'll get
cool.
there.
That's where I want to go.
The first one I want to do is one that I've kind of had in my mind for quite a while, and that's going to be like a almost storytelling podcast where I can have people come on. Sometimes it'll be me, sometimes a guest. Audio only in the beginning to give us a framework to build. But I think everybody has like if Julian, your dead man's car story, right?
Yes.
If you just said that in one sentence, it's the most clickbaity, perfect title for a further, what's one time I found I got almost charged with murder because a dead man was found in my car in Brazil.
Yep.
Right.
Boom, what a great title for a podcast. And then we go through that conversation.
It does sound good, by the way. As a podcast, I'd be like, oh, let me listen to that.
So picking those types of things, I think it's a fun starter point, fun framework for me to do some other things. And then there's going to be another podcast, a separate one, that I think I want to do that is with a friend of mine, Andy, who it's a conspiracy podcast.
There we go.
But the fun part is he is completely uneducated on any conspiracy stuff at all. Which means what we're going to do is we're going to do this framework where we're just going to pick one, and I'm going to talk to him about stick to just the facts. Whatever you can.
Right.
But in the end, my goal, what
exactly.
I want to do is I want to take this person who, as far as he knows, Oswald killed Kennedy. As far as he knows, the CIA is just out keeping us safe from the rest of the world.
Yeah,
That's their job, isn't it?
And I want to turn it.
That's what they do, right?
And I want to turn him into a flat earther just for fun.
There you go.
And
So is that the goal of the podcast, is to turn this person into a flat
he
earther?
doesn't know that.
Yeah, but that's going to
By
be
the
the
way,
podcast.
I am not a flat earther, but I do think actually in that
It might not be as round as we think.
Yeah.
yes, but that framework I think is funny actually because I want to go at that from the point where especially nowadays with conspiracy stuff, it's so demonized now. It's weird.
I agree with that.
It's been come up as like, geez, you wild nut.
Conspiracies, plenty of them are right.
Yeah.
So, not flat earth, obviously, but plenty of them went to the right place. Yeah.
But I think what I think is an issue in all sorts of communication today, you see it with COVID stuff now, is that people don't communicate with an understanding of what these people believe in front of you and what got them there. So what I want to take this project is I want to turn Andy to realizing that Oswald didn't kill Kennedy. And we're going to lay this framework for all of this stuff where all of a sudden he's like, well, wait a minute, maybe I don't trust NASA. And we're going to go through all of the wild stuff.
They had a few Nazis in there, let's be honest.
But now there's some of the really crazy ones too that are just fun to talk about. Have you heard of the Great Mud Flood?
No,
theory?
I did not hear about that one.
It's like the whole world is like 600 years old. And that
I'm out.
I thought it was the one where we lost like 1,000 to
No, there's that one
1,400.
too.
There's that one too, okay.
There's so many really fun ones where they
That one
just
was good.
made up the calendar. But anyway, no, those will just be two really fun, loose frameworks for podcast stuff to keep my podcast mojo rolling. Give me some stuff to do as far as that goes. And so we'll be moving back to the States. Got to pick a side for the Civil War, I guess.
Yeah.
You're going back and then you chose South Dakota?
You got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
I got to start where I can live for cheap and get a car and do
And you know
work.
people, you know who will shoot you
I know
and
exactly
who you will shoot
Yeah.
at. Yes, at least you have those.
I chose South Dakota because that's where all my guns are. I don't want to go to the U.S. and not be where my guns are.
You're not going to choose California, that's for sure. So
no.
exactly.
But yeah, so it's kind of a wide open.
You said you are going to coach a bit?
I'm gonna do a bit of coaching on kind of a really small scale, kind of like the stuff I did with the couple clients I experimented with before the muscle program, where I had done.
What was his name?
I had Justin and I had Garrett and I had a few of the other guys, and I had done that stuff where more of a kind of experimentation.
So like a bit like the big muscle rig program?
Yeah, but really, I want to almost be testing on these guys. You know what I mean? And so a little bit of that kind of stuff. And what I'll actually do for money, who fucking knows?
Are you okay? Let's talk seriously. Are you going to go into pro wrestling? Yes or no? Because you started here.
Okay.
So now that you started,
I did submit. This was a while ago,
finally.
but I haven't got anything back. I did submit, based on my wrestling coaches here recommendation, an application to the WWE. If I'm going to be honest, I'm 36 years old. What would they be thinking hiring me?
Size.
But if they want to throw me a contract for a year, I'll take it.
Yeah.
There's ways to get
putting it out there and everything.
But I want to, I guess, but if we go through kind of the origin of the podcast.
Yeah, let's do this. Why you came on board and everything.
And kind of how we got to where we are now. And I think this is it's a really good example from a career standpoint of the Strongfit principles, right? And so the thing for me that I always felt that what I do is the things I like the most is creating something. Not necessarily always being creative, but taking a thing that didn't exist and making it exist.
The foundation
with
of it.
Maximal resourcefulness, right? Like I can make something out of nothing, probably better than anyone I know. And in that, with the podcast, I knew that Julian would have a platform for people to hear him speak, a big platform, and I just knew that I could do that. I knew I could do it. I knew I could talk.
Build a platform.
And so that's what we did as we came on and we started the podcast. And from there we built, we just started doing it. We had no idea where it would go. We didn't know if it would be a real loose
Did we say
hang.
12 or 16 episodes?
I think 17, like 99% of podcasts fail at 17.
So I think we say we'll do 16 episodes in season 1 and then see where we go from there, if I remember correctly.
My first my first iteration of this that I pitched to Julian was, I think, just a few episodes, and then we were going to
take a break
because with travel.
And try to get more episodes, more ideas for episodes. I remember that.
You weren't rolling out things at the pace you were before then. There was some torque, and there was some this, and there was some podcasts. I had no idea. And so in the beginning, it was that. It was this.
But explain something, because that's important. You said because I think people don't know that. Because at the time you explained to me something that baffled me, which is 90% of podcasts fail at 25?
Less than 20. I think it's 17 or 19 episodes. And I think it's I could be wrong. It's either 90 or it might actually be 99.
It's because they get bored of it, or they just run out of content?
Both. And I do think, and this is a piece that I always give advice when I talk to people about starting your podcast, and I think it works for everything, is you have to build it in a way where you can do it.
Yes.
Right.
And that's the problem is if we got into this podcast, if we started this podcast with lighting and a studio and professional cameramen, and we got in all this whole thing, and we had to do it at the super high quality level, not even knowing what the subject matter would be.
And spend a lot of money.
Spend a bunch of money. Well, like anything you do when you first start it, you're not going to get a bunch of big rewards out of it, and you're not good at it.
Plus, you're not good at it. That's the thing. It takes so long to find your voice.
So it's so difficult to stack all that pressure in the beginning, and that's what happens. If people are spending $2,000 an episode.
You're fucked.
20 episodes later, I hate to break it to you, but after 20 episodes, you're not good and no one's heard of you yet. And so then you're like, well, fuck, where'd that money go?
So how long do you think it takes? And by the way, I think a career you should also look at is helping people do podcasts, because you had a lot of questions toward that.
Yeah, and I'm actually I'm working with a couple people on some of that stuff right now as well, where I can kind of just guide them through and give the advice where I give the advice.
Totally. So, let's do that. Let's educate people on that. How long would you tell someone they have to do a podcast for before they see any result out of it?
No, like any result that really matters to you. You will not get anything out of it for 6 months at a minimum. And in my opinion, your podcast won't even be significant for a year. 1 year.
Yeah, 1 year, right?
Maybe 18 months.
How many episodes do you think it takes to find your voice? Because for me, I felt it was a good 75.
Yeah, I was going to say 75 or 80. Yeah, and that's weekly. If you're doing every other week, it's worse because the gaps in between.
Right. It's even worse. So we're talking over a year to find a year and a half, if not 2 years, to find your voice. Because that's how it felt to me, honestly.
Well, and what if the other thing is like what your podcast format is going to change?
Right.
We started going, we'll do some interviews, we'll grab some people, and then you got into where you really found some inspiration to push towards some other things, and then it was perfect because we were laying out all sorts of foundational framework for Strongfit's principles in there. And then, but then we couldn't have gone into it at that. If I came to you and said, Julian, I need
let's do that.
I need in-depth subject matter from you every single week, and we got to just keep pushing it.
And you need 75 of them?
It's daunting. You know? So what you do is you just do.
You just do.
And that part I think is really, really important.
But I think is people also understood that you won't be good for the first 50 and you don't have to be.
No.
I think it would make it a lot easier for people to do. If you think you're going to be good at 15, I don't care what the content is, you're not. Like when I look back, like if I could change, for example, like we had like 3 subjects. For example, we had that idea that we had to do an hour.
Yeah.
But the problem is an hour covered 4 subjects that each should be a 30-minute or 20-minute podcast on their own.
Well,
and so we can't even find it. Yeah.
We didn't even know if we were going to do subjects.
Right, exactly.
We're
We're
just
just going to
talking for an
talk. Yeah, exactly.
That was the start.
But now we have subjects we can't even find because they're early on and they're in the middle of a 1-hour podcast. So maybe like doing 20 minutes would have been, you find that out over time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's, when I talk about some of the new podcasts I'm going to do, that's the point of the resetting the framework. It's for me going to the storytelling podcast, is that's just something that I think is, it's like, oh, cool. Richard, tell me the story of you on the mountain. You know, those are things that are like, well, that's a fucking fantastic, but narrow enough story so you don't have to take someone's entire life into it. You don't have to educate necessarily. We just build that, and I thought that just sounded really fun. That's a segment that I actually got the idea from doing some of our documentary films here. Is I would have these things like, oh, that would be cool to tell. How can I tell that?
Yeah.
And so, but as far as back to starting podcasts, we started and we just started doing it.
Yeah, we just talked.
But as that grew, trying to think of the other things that we had done from it to how that became the Strongfit Library. How about that, right?
Right.
No, we're good. Fighters are coming in to train.
Okay, so.
No worry, it's all good. You can be in the back. Just not in front of the camera, that's all.
Sorry.
Yeah.
We, one.
Yeah, exactly. And then we go toward the Strongfit Library.
Reset. Okay, but no, so basically from there, we had got all this new subject matter out. And my first goal with the podcast was to give Julian a platform.
Yep.
My second goal was because the Strongfit principles had connected to me so well in the way fitness should be done. I really wanted to find a way to make it permanent, leave that like trail of breadcrumbs, like we posted on Instagram. And the podcast had done a really good job. But then as I start seeing, I'm like, well, shit, I got to get more out there. Like, how else can we start doing
Because they
this?
kept asking for stuff we couldn't put on the podcast, namely the papers, the ideas, the last stuff,
Yeah, and so my options as I started looking at, well, we either need to start writing, like in depth, a lot of this stuff. And that's daunting work, plus some of the context within everything changes. Right. So what I started doing was compiling, first off, everything that we had in any format, from everywhere we got, on any principle we taught. And we had started putting it together, realized what we had, what we didn't have, tagged subjects from the podcast, and we put it all, so here's what we have. But then we knew what we didn't have.
Yeah.
Right.
And from that platform, I had just built it into some little free backbone thing. Yeah. And it worked, and we knew kind of what it could be. And then we ended up shifting stuff over to Kajabi for the online courses, and then learning all sorts of new ways to layer in content, started shining things up. And the Strongfit Library became at least the place, almost our archive. It's really an archive more than a library.
Right.
But it was to learn to go from on-site to online. If you look, it was the first step of taking Strongfit online.
Yeah.
It was a podcast first, obviously, to spread the stuff instead of just doing it at the seminar, doing it everywhere. And then the Strongfit Library was the first step of taking the system and putting it online.
Yeah. And as it sits, it is a chaotic and imperfect but wild
Which I think
collection,
is good because you have to go in and look for it.
Yeah. Well, what we did with it is we just put it there.
There it is.
Yeah.
At least there's a place for you to find it if you want.
And then if we're going to sell, well, we take that now, we can break it down into coursework where then we can guide. But for me, those two big foundational steps were the pieces that I always thought the Strongfit needed was we got to get this stuff down.
Out.
You know, I always used to say, like, I just want to chisel my initials into something permanent.
Right.
And I really think that that's the thing that we need to do. And so once we got that in place, we start developing coursework. We start laying things out into a format. We're getting not just coaches, we're getting regular people. We're able to do anxiety stuff, movement stuff, and things moved very quickly. And it's good because we absolutely had to with COVID.
Right.
And so it was really good timing for us to have that stuff in place so we could make the shift to it. But then what I found was then I'm executing. And it wasn't out of distaste for any of the work, but what I found was, I'm now in this framework now. I'm like, fuck, I need to create something new.
Yeah.
And as soon as that thing gets, we talk about the gut, as soon as that thing gets in your gut where I'm like, I don't know, I gotta get that new bug going, whatever that is. And I just
The inspiration.
yeah, and it's always it's either about one thing or about not this thing. And I had both, where I was like, I just need to not
Make a
be
choice.
here,
Yeah, make a choice.
and I need to fire up something new. I gotta create again. And once I actually hadn't even thought outside of the Strongfit framework, like in months. It was crazy. So as soon as I started looking at that stuff, I was like, oh, well, now I had ideas for this podcast and that podcast. I was like, none of them were going to make me any money for a while, but I think I just need to do them because that's kind of how I operate.
Yeah.
And that became the basis for it. So that was kind of the narrative of the work that I wanted to do that we ended up doing. And then it was like, okay, I think you guys are in this spot right here. It reminds me very, very much of when I left Massonomics too. The timing is interesting too. I think I left Massonomics at approximately 130 episodes, maybe 125.
Funny. Yeah.
Which is like exactly how many we've gotten,
exactly.
I think.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we are 137, 138.
Yeah.
Okay, 131.
So then there's a part where I was like, maybe I'm only capable of paying attention for that long.
Got 130 episodes, guys.
Fuck, I'm out.
Limited series.
But it's like, maybe it's the 2 years in CrossFit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When you get good at the stuff and you're like, now what?
Now what?
Do I compete?
Yeah.
Do I take the next step or do I just find something else?
And when we talk about the, kind of the exploration, or going
the
to
novelty
a
search.
divergent, novelty search is the big thing for me in that like I do these games where I can get this and I play this. I make the next move. And then I get here, I'm like, fuck.
Well, you need a new
I gotta
subject.
blow it all out. Yeah.
You need a new subject.
Yeah. So just like we talk with that, I pull back, open up the parameters, take a run at it
Or you
again.
need a new subject. It's like, let me go learn leg locks.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. But it just maybe relates to progress.
Yeah.
Because if you look the first 2 years or whatever, it's the big chunk of progress.
Yeah.
It's very rewarding.
Yeah.
When you build a structure, it's very chaotic and rough, but it's also very rewarding.
But that's the framework where I really like to work in that. I like even getting some of this stuff going for the other podcasts. It's weird. Like, I gotta come up with a name. You come up with all the worst shit right away. You're like, I need a name, I need a logo, all the things you don't
You can have, with conspiracy, you can have fun with the names.
But I think it'll be, so those will be fun projects. I think.
I would help people with their podcast. I think you could get a lot.
Well, and I think that's the thing that I'm going to do.
Business-wise,
That's the
you
thing
could
I'm going to do for some money for sure.
Yeah.
So, and that's a project I've got going where I think it helps. You always forget how little people. No, and the fact is, the reason I like this medium is it's pretty easy to start, actually.
Right, but like I think people need a lot of help. Everybody wants to start a podcast. They have no idea what it feels like on the first 50. Like I can never watch mine. Like watching me talk. It's murder. But the fact that no matter what, it's jiu-jitsu, man. It's gonna take you so many reps to get good at it, regardless. And it's not content.
Yeah.
Because we always had content. It's just talking in front of a camera, getting good at it, doing it every fucking week. It's far more stressful than it sounds. I think,
and I will tell you guys this, the best advice I can give you is if you're going to be on your own podcast, don't edit your own video either because you will hate your voice and your face by the end of it. Oh my God. So now we're looking at probably, what's it been? I don't know, like 260, 270 podcast episodes I've done of my own and edited with my own. Man, do you want to just stop listening to yourself talk?
Yeah.
I can imagine because I can barely watch one or two. So
though I will say there are some people who just like study their own podcasts and like really take that as an art, but good for them.
Good for
them. That's like
Kanye.
Kanye loves listening to his own voice and everything.
That's great. Good for them. But like there's people that can talk to the camera.
Yeah.
And I see that on YouTube all the time. I'm like, I don't know how you do it. I want to shoot myself every day.
Yeah, the whole setting up the camera just
like this,
without anybody around, I can't.
Now, there's a skill for you there.
If you ever want to see like the fine art of that, whatever that is, just ranting, like Bill Burr's podcast and his Monday Morning Podcast has been out for now forever. I think like almost 10 years, something like that.
It just goes.
And it is him with a fucking microphone. And he just rants for like an hour every week, once a week. And every bit of it is almost as funny as a stand-up special. Like how a human being can do it, I have no fucking idea. I can do these conversations with camera, I can talk at seminars, but I'll be goddamn, I turn the camera on by myself and it's just like, redo.
I did, but plus like I did the Genius Corner podcast on Max O'Livan this morning. and it's 15 minutes. First of all, it's 8 hours of work for 15 minutes. And after 15 minutes, I even took a break in between because I'm like, I need 1 minute. Like, let me get back. I was already getting tired and hungry. I was like, oh my God. And then like halfway through I break and I finish because it's so, conversational is easy. Like if you do by the way, choose the podcast you want to do because conversation is easy. The one-on-one or the subject-based is not. That's a whole different dimension.
There's really cool formats out there too that people do. You see some of those like mini series ones where it's like 8 episodes, a little more production value. Some of those things are neat to experiment with. So, but I think getting in that foundational process with other people with starting podcasts, I think also the industry. The interesting thing is, I've said this since we moved here, the podcast industry in Europe is still a baby compared to what it is in the US.
Yeah, it's in infancy.
Except now, right now, look at what all other media consumption in the US has done since COVID is crashed.
Even
nobody's watching fucking
podcast,
movies. Nobody's watching fucking TV except unless they just want to be mad.
Podcasts went down 20%.
Podcasts are going down, but
not as much.
Not near as much, which means there's space. You're not going to be consuming movies at the level you did 2 years ago for a long time now. It's going to take a long time for that to start back up, for the financial incentives on the back end to feed the front end. It's going to be 5, 6, 7 years before you're seeing movies coming out where it's like Black Panther, Avengers, and like all that stuff. The money is not going to be there to produce media for people to consume like that. And I think podcasts are easy to consume. They're very focused on your interests. And I think that makes, if a person wants to communicate something to somebody, it makes it a really, really good avenue to do it. So I actually think, I used to say this.
Outside the mainstream.
Exactly. When I started this with Massonomics was 4.5 years ago now. That was my pitch then was, geez, the best time to start a podcast then would have been 4 years ago.
Right.
I said, well, the only other option is right now. And I said the same thing here. And I was like, well, but we can start right now. And we did. And sure enough, it's kind of the tide keeps rising. There's still podcasts are bigger and bigger.
Yeah, it's not common in Europe yet.
No.
They haven't found that one out.
But
yet.
I think it's population size too, right? I mean, you look, if you do a Dutch podcast, you really have a population size of 17 million.
Yeah. I think the value, though, in this, too, is I think there's on the business side of podcasting is that there is I think an untapped value in the small market podcast. Someone who has, like, if you have a CrossFit gym and you want your brand to transcend your town or your region, the fact is if you have 200 people, 300 people in your gym, you can communicate. We learned this with COVID the most, is like, you actually need to help these people with their health 24 hours a day.
Right.
Yeah.
Meaning you can communicate with them. You can be in their ear an extra hour a week. You can
you can talk about COVID more or less.
Yeah.
That's another problem. But
But you can, but then, it's really difficult. How are you supposed to communicate all of your things to your clients about your philosophies on nutrition, advice, fun? How are they supposed to connect to you? And I think that you can do that almost directed internally towards your people, and then that will shine publicly, and then people can kind of find your vibe, and that can attract to your gym as well. And I think there's also then in these small market podcasts, I think there's really good value for like business partnerships as well. If you
they need a superstar in Europe for podcast though.
Yeah.
You know that there are Joe Rogan in the US and a bunch of stuff like that. I haven't seen a European star, maybe because of languages, by the way.
Yeah,
maybe that's why.
That's a big piece.
Up.
I still have never came up with a good solution for that for any of the people I've talked to. Some in Austria, some in Germany, and I think.
Do you go English or do you go?
It's like, well, what do you want to do?
But then you have to
go
put
back
subtitles.
and forth is difficult.
No, because everybody asks for subtitles, but they don't understand how expensive the shit would be for us to do subtitles on every podcast. Like we can't. It's just way too expensive. And it's so much work.
Yeah,
it's so much work. Like
he's got a French accent. It's crazy to do it automatically.
Right. Well,
it does not work.
Yeah, it does not work. But even we had someone who did it, like Victoria, but it was at 8 hours of work for her for 1 hour podcast. It's absurd the amount of money and time you would have to spend.
So I think
I'm not doing it.
That's a difficult thing to make a global impact with your podcast. But it's hard to say, but you can't replicate Rogan either. So I always try to say, what do you do?
Do what you do.
Do that really well. Yeah. And show it to the people you want to show it to, and then from there we start.
Right.
And I do that's the thing I always thought with the small market podcast is it's more like a local radio show.
But imagine a business. What we're saying is to start a business. I mean, it's relating to your business usually, even if it might turn into a business, sucking completely at it and accepting that for the first 2 years you're going to do shit. Yeah. That's a weird business plan.
Yeah. And that's the tough too. That's the pitch I always try to give too. Is like, well, this is actually it's a legacy project.
Yeah.
What it really
Yeah,
is.
yeah,
It's like this is no short game. There's no.
Yeah.
That's the way this was too. This is a legacy project.
Yeah.
This is well now there's 200 hours.
But let's explain that too, by the way. We did it so that there was also not a business aspect, but kind of about it also is to what I say being recorded at a certain time.
Yeah.
Because a lot of what we say has been used,
Taken without.
taken and
Coming
used
right
by
from the horse's mouth.
others, but then we could put a timestamp on it. And 3 years ago, I said that first.
Yeah.
There was also that part, like the need to have the Strongfit associated with the principles and put it somewhere where it would live online so it couldn't be just outright stolen.
Right.
They said that there's that aspect as well, and I think that matters.
Yeah, and that's what's tough is like if you have something to say, well, better start saying it. That's the way we kind of went at it with it,
And it's bypassing mainstream news.
Completely.
And that's very important as
and
well.
I do think as you see, like with everything, if you have any controversial point of view, censorship, getting flagged from YouTube,
Yeah.
things like that, at least the actual medium of podcasting, yeah, you're tethered through Apple or whatever
now.
these third-party
For
things
now.
are. But the truth is, you can have your own web domain
Yeah.
and uploading, say you're doing audio only, you can upload all that shit and handle that bandwidth
Under your
for
own
very,
name,
very, very cheap. And so it is very decentralized, and it is, I think, the direction that I think a lot of things are going to shift to.
Yeah.
You know, because right now, like the Google, the YouTube, the Facebook.
Let's see what Spotify does.
Yeah.
You never know, because with Joe, you never know. Like
Well,
I'd be
Facebook
very
and
curious.
Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, they've all just updated their terms and conditions.
Oh, great.
And they said, as long as you use our products, you are agreeing to these new terms and conditions.
yeah.
And I tried to click on it to open up the terms and conditions, and it's yet to load on my phone. Conspiracy theory.
Yeah,
Did you ever
exactly.
see there's a South Park episode called
Yeah.
The Human Centipede?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one's great.
Where
With
in the terms and
apples.
conditions, it's like, well, I got to sew your mouth to some guy's ass.
Yeah.
Tim Pool brought Alex Jones, and then YouTube just yanked him.
Yeah.
They just won't do it to Joe Rogan.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Because it's too big. But
Do you know what they flagged him for, by the way?
no,
One statement in the entire, of course, and don't get me wrong, Alex Jones sends a lot of shit, and I listened to that thing, and I'm like, Alex, shut up.
Yes, you're gonna get kicked out
his
again.
own worst enemy.
there's no doubt.
He could literally just talk slowly, not speak over people, speak the truth, let them fact check it, and and he could just sit there and be like, "Told you," but instead
No.
he talks a madman, and then he says one thing about firing squads, and then it's a threat.
So,
That is what he's
okay.
said, and there's threatening violence. I'm like, man, that is really picking a lot of fucking bones, like picking the
Yeah.
bones clean from an Alex Jones conversation.
Yeah, but you also have to know if you're Alex Jones that they just wait for you to say it.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
you know it's coming.
sure.
Yeah. Anyway.
sure.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're moving back. That's going to be the kind of the long and short of it. We're going to go back, just kind of restart, get reacclimated to American living. There's one piece I'm really looking forward to.
Amazon Prime.
Well, that too.
Customer
Customer
service.
service is another one. But you know, the thing that between Austria and here that I never quite got used to, this is going to
English.
sound small, is that every human interaction starts with the wrong language.
Yeah.
Almost. So there's
Right.
always is a correction, and then there's about a 50% chance of it going well after that. In Austria, it was about 15.
Yeah, more in Australia than here.
But
Yeah.
that was, but it was. It's always
Just,
interesting.
okay, tell the truth. You just miss being able to read stuff in the streets.
That too.
You're like, I have no fucking
know,
idea what you're saying.
Oh, have I said this on the? Here's another thing. This is because of that thing, like not knowing the language. I don't really bother to read every sign that I see in a store either.
Shit.
And so I found this is like a, not conspiracy thing, but with COVID, there's rules now for everywhere you go, and everywhere's got 20 rules. They're posted everywhere. And I just kind of don't pay attention to signs.
Because you can't read them.
But I also feel like it's like it's like a brainwashing thing for advertising, isn't it? That like, oh, there's a sign up. You didn't read every word that was on that thing that we had on our wall that tells you what to do. And I'm like, well, no, because I don't.
You know what
fucking
you're
care.
going to get in the US? You're going to be able to watch TV, be able to read websites.
Yes.
All the stuff where you feel alienated whenever you're not in your own country.
Probably.
I had that life for a long time now. So yeah, exactly.
I
Yeah.
can believe that, but it'll be really interesting. It's that new exciting phase. Start over, rebuild, and kind of see where things go. So it's that very beginning of the novelty search thing where it's all wide open.
Is it at like, aren't we coming up exactly at 2 years on a podcast?
It says no. It's like little over 2. It's been
Oh, a little bit.
2
Okay,
years
I
and a
thought
couple
we were
months on
coming.
the
Okay.
podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
We
good
made
luck
it.
over there.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Good
guys.
luck, man.
Good luck over there, man.
Keep an eye on these fellas.
Oh, we'll still
Yeah.
be here. Amsterdam. I like it. So we're staying here for a while.
And I guess want to follow me at Tyler F. and Stone. The other 2 podcasts I have tentatively named. I'll make announcements soon.
Yes. I'll be listening to the conspiracy one. I won't lie.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Awesome.
Beautiful.
All right.
Bye, guys.
Well, guys. Bam diggity.
Support the podcast, heading over to podcast.strongfit.com. There you could donate or join the YouTube channel. Also, go to strongfit.com. There you're going to find our online courses, education, and all of our seminar dates should be there as well. Head on over to strongfitlibrary.com to keep up to date on everything Julian's been working on. And follow StrongFit1 on Instagram and Tyler F. and Stone.